Last time we talked about why Thomas Tuchel didn't work out at Bayern Munich. Hello and welcome to the Always Bayern Chelsea show. This is going to be a little bit of a different episode than what we normally do here. First things first, it's on video, so head over to the YouTube channel, Always Bayern Chelsea, and take a look if that's not where you're already watching this. But this one's going to be a little bit more of a video essay style of video instead of a normal podcast like we normally do. I'll still post the audio up to Apple and Spotify, so go ahead and listen there if that's what you please. But yeah, my name is Danny. I'm the Bayern Munich half of Always Bayern Chelsea, and today I'm going to be doing a video on what went wrong with Thomas Tuchel at Bayern Munich. So go ahead and do all the video stuff that you're supposed to do on the YouTube channel if you want to, like it and subscribe, and thanks for joining me. Like I said, at Always Bayern Chelsea, we do podcasts and videos sometimes about my team, Bayern Munich, and my buddy Jim's team, Chelsea. So check out the other episodes if you want to listen to that. So without further ado, it's time to talk about what went wrong with Thomas Tuchel at Bayern Munich. This is a video that's kind of been a long time coming. I've wanted to do this for quite some time now because, there's been a lot on my mind relating to Thomas Tuchel and his tenure at Bayern Munich, so why don't we jump right into it? And first things first, I just wanted to put this out there right away. This might not be the most controversial or, sensationalized take, but regardless of the points that I make in this video, I just want to say I think that Thomas Tuchel is a good coach from the standpoint of a game-to-game, tactical management style of coaching. He's very good at that. You can't argue against that, really. I mean, he took now 3 teams to the Champions League semifinals, and he won it with Chelsea. He took PSG there, and Bayern was minutes away from the final as well. As we all know, unfortunately, that last-minute collapse against Real Madrid ruined the hopes of a Champions League final for Bayern Munich this season. So that being said, no matter what I say about Tuchel, if it sounds like I'm ragging on him, I think he's a good coach. However, at the same time, I think that he was not the right fit for Bayern Munich. I think that he was not the right fit for Bayern Munich tactically. I think that he was not the right fit for Bayern Munich from a personality standpoint, and I think that, from a man management standpoint, that was one of the areas where he really struggled as well at the club. So I think to kind of start things off with those two seemingly opposable truths in mind, or at least I view them as truths, maybe you can make your own opinions or make your own decisions on that. But let's rewind the clock a little bit here, because I think you can kind of see this ever-changing wheel of coaches at Bayern Munich as a sign of things greater than one individual person, one individual coach. So looking back a couple years now, the last truly, successful, it's a relative term, coach you could point to at Bayern Munich would be Hansi Flick. And Hansi Flick ended up leaving the club, I would argue maybe a little bit early because of some disagreements with higher-up board members and management at the club. So Hansi Flick ends up leaving, and Bayern Munich goes on to hire Julian Nagelsmann, who at the time, and I guess still is now, now he's the coach for the German national team, was kind of a young gun, a young, seemingly talented genius, some might say, as a coach. And Nagelsmann was given a 5-year contract. He was meant to be this project coach, for the next couple of years to kind of usher Bayern Munich into the next era that the team wanted to go in, and the team wanted to kind of head towards for, hopefully glory. Unfortunately, that didn't work out. Nagelsmann was sacked very early on in his tenure, at kind of the first signs of things maybe not looking ultra successful like Bayern Munich was used to. So Nagelsmann gets sacked, and in comes Tuchel. And I think you can look at the early sacking, I would say, of Nagelsmann. One of the reasons for that was the board saw that Thomas Tuchel was available, and they were afraid that they were not going to be able to get him, if they waited much longer. Nagelsmann gets unexpectedly sacked, and in comes Thomas Tuchel. Thomas Tuchel comes in and ends up winning the Bundesliga in his first season, albeit not a very successful season from the standpoint of wins and points for Bayern Munich. However, he won the Bundesliga. He won that trophy. And part of the reason why Bayern Munich won that trophy that season was basically because Dortmund bottled it at the very end of the season. Bayern comes in and wins on the very last day. And whether you want to look at that as a successful season or not, I guess that's up to you, but that's kind of how things went that first season. You could see, in my opinion, if you were watching the club, you could see sort of a downward trend. And that downward trend continued into Thomas Tuchel's next season as head coach, which would have been this last season that just happened, 2023 to 2024. So Tuchel starts the second season as head coach, and things aren't looking great. This downward trend potentially is continuing. And, they lose the German Super Cup to Leipzig in a match where Tuchel maybe didn't play the best players. That's what I would say. You could have your own opinion on that if you want to. But anyways, Bayern starts off the season, the 2023 to 2024 season, losing the Super Cup. They get bounced from the DFB Pokal early, which, again, potentially the wrong player choices were made by Tuchel in that match. They lose a match to a team that they should have beat, and now we're looking ahead at the Bundesliga. And in the Bundesliga season, Bayern Munich is winning matches, but not winning matches convincingly, not winning matches like you would expect them to win. And on the other side, Leverkusen is cruising. They're not losing. I guess I should say they are winning or drawing all of their matches. And they beat Bayern Munich pretty convincingly in the second half of the season now. They beat Bayern Munich 3-0, and the very next match Bayern plays is the Champions League against Lazio. They lose that first leg 1-0. And at this point, we're in February, and the board members decide Tuchel's getting sacked. He's going to stay on as the head coach, but he's going to be a caretaker. I guess caretaker isn't even really the right word, but he's going to stick on as head coach and finish out the season, while Bayern Munich openly goes for Xabi Alonso as their next head coach. But yeah, Tuchel gets sacked and is finishing out the season. He has a great Champions League run into the semifinals. Bayern Munich finishes third in the Bundesliga, which is, the first time they haven't won it since 2011, 2012. And there are rumors that Thomas Tuchel might stay on as coach. That gets squashed, for whatever reason. Disagreements on how long his next contract should be, maybe disagreements about the amount of power that he should have in the club, whatever. Tuchel is sacked, he's gone. Bayern brings in Vincent Kompany. So, in a nutshell, that's the story of Thomas Tuchel at Bayern Munich, and now I just want to highlight some of his flaws as a coach, and then I will go on to highlight what I think are some of his strengths as a coach, at least during his time at Bayern Munich. So, starting with faults, as I kind of previewed Tuchel's tenure at Bayern Munich, one of the things you could maybe tell that I was a little bit displeased about were some of his lineup choices. So, in the beginning of the season, Thomas Tuchel benched a lot of key players. He benched Matthijs de Ligt, Thomas Muller, Joshua Kimmich, Leon Goretzka, and these guys are really cornerstones of the club. They're leaders, and especially when you look at the center back position, Matthijs de Ligt is Bayern's best defender, so in my mind, there's no reason he should be on the bench. Thomas Tuchel ran certain guys into the ground. Leroy Sané, we get to the end of the year, he's totally injured. I would even say Jamal Musiala. And then, Dayot Upamecano and Kim Min-jae, these two center backs who Tuchel refused to stop playing in the beginning of the season, even though you have someone like De Ligt sitting on the bench inexplicably. And so not only is Tuchel putting out these lineups that aren't necessarily Bayern's strongest lineups week after week, he's also publicly, through the media, throwing some players under the bus, openly calling for some players' replacements. I'm talking about Joshua Kimmich specifically. Then you get to a point in the season where either through poor performances from the players that you were playing or this plethora of injuries based off of a lot of things, but at least in part due to your player management style, you're forced to play these guys who, are clearly professional enough to handle this sort of thing, but you can't say that they're going to be excited to go out there and perform for you. Reports on losing the locker room are sort of hard to, characterize and hold any weight towards, but you certainly weren't doing yourself any favors in that sense. One more thing I wanted to add here would be the loaning of Stanisic to Bayer Leverkusen. The right back essentially did not fit in Thomas Tuchel's plans for the team, and as it turned out throughout the year, Bayern was pretty thin at that position, and Stanisic also proved himself this season, just especially to have that clutch gene to really come up with goals and big plays when it mattered. So loaning him out to Leverkusen was, in my mind, one of Tuchel's biggest failures from the standpoint of player management. So a combination of all those things, Tuchel's player management, his lineups, and also his personality. He has kind of this bold, abrasive personality where he has his guys. He's very stubborn with his guys. He's going to roll with them through thick and thin, and he's not going to give some of these other players who, quite frankly, have proven themselves at Bayern Munich over and over and have so many trophies to prove it, guys who step up in the bright lights time and time again and win when it counts. He's not trusting these players, and that's a huge mistake, quite frankly. At a club like Bayern Munich, you have to deal with so many things in the locker room. The egos of certain players is one of those things. Now, just as important as talking about all of those things, I think, is mentioning that Tuchel's style just wasn't a fit for Bayern Munich. Bayern Munich has been known as being a German machine, an aggressive, especially under Nagelsmann and Flick, and that just isn't Thomas Tuchel's style. He wants to play a more passive, possession-based type of football where you kind of swing the ball around in this U-shaped formation, Tuchel ball. It's known as U-ball. And that just doesn't work out at Bayern Munich. You have these players, I've talked about it many times on this program, but you have a guy like Harry Kane dropping back and almost playing defense at times and assisting other players when he's the best goal scorer in the world, the best striker in the world, Because of his unselfishness, he's willing to do whatever it takes for the team. And obviously Kane still scores a ton of goals, which is a testament to him. I'm going to be making another video completely dedicated to Harry Kane and his brilliance, but Tuchel has this style of trying to play possession-based ball and then maybe eke out a goal here, eke out a goal there, and then just kind of lock down and play completely passively and just hold on to that small victory, or that small, lead, because it didn't always turn out to be a victory in the case of Thomas Tuchel. And while that sort of play actually ended up working out great for them in the Champions League, I need to give Tuchel his credit for that. It just didn't work in the Bundesliga, and it's not in the ethos of what Bayern Munich is. So after going through all these negative things and really taking down Thomas Tuchel and his time at Bayern Munich, I'd like to just end the video by talking about his strengths, the things that I thought he did well at the club, and the things that hopefully Vince and company and other coaches going forward can learn from. So to start, Thomas Tuchel truly did point out some flaws at Bayern Munich. He pointed out some flaws in their management. He pointed out some weaknesses in their lineup. or at least some spots where they're thin. They are thin in the midfield. They could use some reinforcement there. Now, the way he went about doing it maybe wasn't the best. Turned out not being the best for him as he ended up getting sacked. However, he did point out some real flaws in Bayern Munich. And moreover from that, he did deal with a seemingly toxic board. I could make a whole video about the board situation at Bayern Munich and the power players who aren't currently involved in the organization but still have such a huge say. There's a lot of cooks in that kitchen, and he had to deal with all of that. You can say he did it gracefully, you can say he did it not so gracefully, but it can't be easy for any coach to have to deal with that headache while trying to coach a team. So there were plenty of negative comments made about Tuchel, at especially inopportune times right before the Champions League semifinal against Madrid, and he had to do his best to just kind of suck it up and deal with that. I mean, that sort of thing couldn't be easy when you're trying to manage a club. And Tuchel had to deal with plenty of injuries, as I mentioned before. Bayern Munich was struck with the injury bug this season, and just the most important matches, Tuchel was going in with guys that weren't 100%, a lot of guys that couldn't even play, or you weren't sure if they were going to be able to play, hours before a match. So that can't be easy, and he even got a lot of key wins this season without some of his best players. There's a couple more strengths that I need to talk about relating to Tuchel's time at Bayern Munich, and one of those strengths was IDing and developing the young talent that is Alexander Pavlovic from the academy at Bayern Munich. And Pavlovic was kind of brought up last year by Tuchel and really showed signs before a couple of injuries and illnesses of really being the next great midfielder for Bayern Munich. Similar in profile to Toni Kroos, and I really don't say that lightly. So outside of Pavlovic, there's a chance that Zvanarek, who Tuchel pulled up at the end of the season as well and got some minutes at the very end of the Bundesliga season and looked good, quite frankly, there's a chance that he develops into something great too. And the other thing to mention too about Thomas Tuchel is that he was instrumental in bringing Harry Kane over to Bayern Munich. He was a huge part of that process. He was a huge advocate for Kane, and Bayern is obviously better off because of it, regardless of what those who might think that Kane is cursed might have to say about that. Tuchel was a big part in bringing Kane to Bayern, and he was also a big part in bringing Eric Dyer over to Bayern. And Eric Dyer, is the target for a lot of ridicule, certainly in the footballing world. But Dyer made a big impact for Bayern last year, and he really stepped up in a leadership role and just played solid when we needed him to. So Bayern fans can thank Tuchel for those things at least. And as I mentioned at the top of the video, Tuchel is a good coach for the one game, tactical battle scenario. If you want to put your blinders on and look at things strictly through that lens, the man's a good coach. I mean, as I said at the top of the video, he works his magic sometimes in these big-time bright lights, in these tournament matches. So I think that's going to about wrap it up for me here today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for checking out the Always Bayern Chelsea program. You can listen to other episodes, which, like I said, are more podcast format, more radio format than this one here. So, do all the things you're supposed to do if you'd like. Subscribe, like the video, maybe rate us on the podcasting apps. That would help us out a lot. That's all I got to say. Thank you for listening. Hope you'll join us on the next one.